3 years ago, I spent my life savings on what turned out to be a rotten boat. I spent a year at sea, blissfully unaware of what was awaiting me. And on the 1-year anniversary, I took the boat out of the water. And that is when I discovered the true state of the vessel. A 2-week haul-out turned into a multi-year refit. And in the last few episodes, I started to repair the transom. Rot had infected the framing, and electrolysis had started to melt the wood around the rudder post. So I put new frames in the transom and spliced a fresh piece of wood into the keel. Next up was tackling the big issue with the ring timber. I'm an animator and filmmaker by trade, with no previous woodworking or boat building experience, and the next steps in this repair was going to push my newfound skills to the limit. This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Spring was slowly turning into summer, but the nights were still cold and the fog would lay thick in the morning. But as soon as the sun came out, the fog would quickly lift and you'd be reminded of how close summer actually was. The boatyard is a much nicer place in spring. You tend to focus less on the dirt and the grime when the tree springs their leaves. The weather was slowly turning from near constant rain to drier and drier days, which meant that I could put more work into the boat. The rebuild of the stern was moving along at a steady pace, but now the most complicated pieces were left. The corners of the ring timber had completely rotted out. I suspected the pieces were original all the way back from the 1940s. Rot in a boat like this is like cancer in a body. It needs to be ruthlessly cut out and replaced with fresh wood. Well, it's basically impossible to keep fresh wood away from rotten wood in a rebuild like this. It is preferable. Spores spread and take hold in wood. All it needs is a certain level of moisture. And while I was using a notoriously rot-resistant wood, I would still have to sanitize the fresh wood once it was all done. But first I needed to get all the new wood in place and all the rotten stuff out of there. I'd already recorded the shape of the fashion pieces, something you can watch in a previous episode. Now it was a matter of transcribing that to a fresh piece of door skin to make a form of template to make sure that I had recorded the shape correctly. Recreating this piece was not going to be easy. It was so rotten that in some places there was nothing to take a pattern of. But it was also one of the more complex pieces in the boat. Not only did it curve and change thickness, but it also changed bevel as it went up and down the boat. That meant that I couldn't just set the bandsaw to one angle and cut it out, but I would have to shape the piece by hand to make sure that it curved right as the hole came in at the top. Luckily, I'd seen this done multiple times while I documented the North Star project. Multiple of her frames had progressive curves cut into them, and the transom had just been replaced. Basically every piece of wood in the North Star was being replaced, which meant for me that I got to see every piece of wood get shaped and put back together. 8 hours per day was spent either recording, writing about, or filming boat building, not counting the hours I was putting in on my own boat. 6 months in, I was starting to get somewhat of an understanding of how a boat was put together. My full-time job and the work on my own boat was basically becoming like a shipwright's apprenticeship, and the cost of my tuition was the wood and fasteners that went into the boat. Every dollar I had over after food and bills was spent on wood and fasteners. Most of the tools I had either came with the boat or were found in one of the dumpsters in the boatyard. The rest I borrowed from the shop. These I can use though. We've got another bin here. Is there any goodies? Pair of
sunglasses. Sit. Damn, they fit you, buddy. Look at those. They look great, hey? They suit you really well. I think you should keep them. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. No, okay. You don't want them. Good. You don't have to. We'll put them back. Okay.
Oh, what's this? Time for an ad. Well, that reminds me that this video is sponsored by Surfshark. Now, I spend a whole bunch of time surfing on sites I probably shouldn't be on, and watching things like
Welcome to How to Rebuild Wooden Boats for Dummies.
Surfshark keeps your data private, so what you do online stays between you and you alone. If you want to prevent sites like booking agents for flights, hotel stays and car rentals from using your data to raise the prices on you, then a VPN is the way to go. I've used VPN for years, mostly just to keep my browsing secure, especially when I'm at random networks or traveling, like to different marinas or airports. It's kind of like this: you lock your door, you insure your house, you wear a seatbelt. So it makes sense to protect your life online too. So if you want to protect all your devices while also getting 4 months extra, you could either head over to surfshark.com/fast. You can use the code FAST in the app or on the website, or you can click the link in the description to protect your online life today. To transcribe my rough pattern to a fresh piece of door skin, I used a slim piece of wood and some finishing nails. Once that was in place, I could draw my lines that I could then follow with the bandsaw. With the new pattern made and being able to make sure that all my measurements were correct, I was confident enough to start working on the actual piece of timber. I was using the same black locust as I'd used for the straight frames in the stern. I started by cutting off the bark and sapwood to make the slab a bit easier to handle. It had a few knots here and there, something I had to pay attention to when I laid out my pattern, as I definitely didn't want any of that in my new piece. With the locust stock cut, I could lay out my pattern and transcribe it onto the wood, again using a thin wood batten to get a nice line. When making these patterns, you're almost always ending up with slight inconsistencies between the measuring points. And the batten basically becomes an average between all these points, making sure that you get a fair and even line. At this point I was starting to get fairly used to this technique of using patterns to make new pieces. And I have to say, it is incredibly satisfying taking something so old and rotten and making something new out of it. This piece was the most complex I'd taken on until now. I was pretty nervous. Messing this up would not only cost me time, but it could set me back to the next payday, as I would have to get a new slab of wood. Instead of cutting a progressive bevel on the bandsaw, something that would require me to have help to move the bandsaw as I progressed, I decided to cut the smallest bevel and then shape it by hand afterwards. It was starting to dawn on me that boat building is as much a sculptural craft as it is working with straight lines and shapes. After I set the bandsaw, I double-checked with the old piece that the angle was correct and that I wasn't cutting the steepest angle by mistake. Some of you with a keen eye might have noticed my black fingertip. In my enthusiasm working on the boat, I hit the wrong kind of nail, specifically my fingernail, with all the might and strength I could muster. While I surprisingly enough didn't break or crush the bone, I did manage to completely obliterate the nail, forcing me to have it removed in the most unpleasant of ways at the hospital. Though it did give me a great excuse to get my tetanus vaccine at the same time. Something much needed working in this kind of environment. I carefully followed the lines I'd made with my pattern, cutting out the new fashion piece. When making these cuts, I was giving myself a little bit of meat in some places. Better to cut too little than too much. Black locust sometimes has a funny smell when you're cutting it. It basically smells like manure, probably one of my least favorite smells when working with wood. I could feel the nervous energy surging through my body as I was making my final cut. Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. I sometimes wonder what little Johannes would have thought if someone told him, or me, that I'd be restoring a massive wooden yacht all on my own one day. I mean, if you would have told me 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have believed you. With the 2 major cuts done, I double-checked my bevels. Everything seemed fine. All I needed to do was refine it a little bit before trying to dry fit it into the boat. If you're watching this episode and you haven't yet subscribed, I would greatly appreciate if you did. It's really hard to grow as a small YouTuber, and subscribing, liking and commenting on these videos helps me a lot in making my dream a reality. I want to be really honest and open with what I'm trying to achieve here, and of course I am trying to do this as a full-time job, something that I'm inching closer and closer to thanks to all of your support. If you want to go the extra mile and support this project financially, you can check out my Patreon. There I offer early videos, bonus content and a whole bunch of other perks. The fashion piece was, to my great surprise, fitting almost perfectly on the first try, except for a little bit of meat needing to be removed along the outer edge. Some careful hand shaping should be all it needed to go into place. On the inner edge I used a specialized planer called a horseshoe planer. It has a curved surface to be able to work on inner curves like this one. To finish it off I used an old spoke shave, but with the locust being extremely dense it wasn't an easy job. And Atyas always sleeping to the sound of his father's work. With a little bit of coaxing with a piece of wood and a mallet, the fashion piece went into place, seemingly a perfect fit. At this point, I was very satisfied with myself, having successfully made a piece that had been taunting me for weeks. It felt like a major step forward in the restoration of the stern, but I was far from finished. With the sunny weather, life on board was suddenly a lot more comfortable. And while I come from a country that is similarly dark and dreary in the winter, I do feel the effects of the darkness on my mood. And with the roughness of living in the boatyard, the boat leaking from multiple points in the roof, and with the stress of this gigantic project, I have been pushed to my limits during the winter months. Stress dreams, always of the boat being in some extreme and odd situation, was plaguing me during the nights. But my hope was that these dreams would start to ease up the more new wood I got back into the boat. With the first fashion piece done, and it having gone a lot smoother than I thought, I was starting to realize that maybe I shouldn't doubt myself so much, and maybe I should try to listen a bit more to all the Zen books I'd read. With the new piece in place, I could move on to the backing block. It connects the fashion piece to the lower ring timber. And while it's a small piece, it was still fairly complicated, as it spanned the starboard side of the hull, across the chine, and into the flat bottom part of the hull. That meant it had multiple angles that I had to get correct. And it was in some sense maybe even more complicated than the big fashion piece. But by now I knew the MO. Make a pattern, strike a line, cut it out, and do all that without messing up or cutting off my fingers, hopefully. The truth is, I actually did end up messing up this piece, and I had to redo it. But that is something that I didn't caught on camera, but I at least wanted to come clean and let you know that I do mess up. I actually do mess up a lot. But if I included every mistake in these videos, they'd be hours long, and no one wants that. What did get me on this piece was the bevels. The different bevels, depending on which side of the piece it was, left to right or on the upper side or lower side, was really hard to get right, especially when it was so deteriorated. One of the offcuts from the fashion piece was luckily big enough to get this one done. I loved the satisfying feeling of finding the perfect offcut that you'd been saving. All the smaller offcuts that couldn't be used for the boat I turned into wedges. I started by splitting the wood, getting it to the right thickness I needed for the backing piece. I then set the table saw for the smallest angle that I needed. Then I could start cutting carefully to not mess it up. It took quite a bit of effort to get it to fit snugly, and it ended up being quite a bit more difficult to actually get it to sit right compared to the fashion piece. But with a bit of work I got it in place. Now all I need to do was repeat all of this on port side. Behind the boatyard there's a big sandpile where Atyas loves to run. It's become a bit of a refuge where we go after a long day's work. Atyas gets to run in the sand, and afterwards I get to sleep in a sandy bed. Just kidding, or not really, but it is a really nice place to go and just sit and look out over the pond. Watch the birds fly and the ducks swim around. And sometimes we go out here to catch the sunset in the distance. But I can't spend too much time out here because I have a boat to rebuild. Another slab of wood, another pattern, now repeating everything but mirrored. But this time I was riding high on the confidence of having succeeded with the first one. In the upper corner on port side there was some signs of repair. A piece of wood was just kind of hanging there, and I'm not really sure why. I'm suspecting that maybe when they were trying to refasten some of the planking in the transom, the fashion piece didn't really have anything for it to bite to because it was too rotten. So I suspect they added that piece to have something to fasten to. Now was the time to rectify that. When taking a boat like this apart, you end up finding generations of repair. It's almost like an archaeological dig. You can see the materials change through the years. Bronze turning into stainless steel, and tight-grained oak and teak being replaced by whatever is available in that place at that time. Now it gets scary when it comes to the electrical system. This boat still has old fuses and breakers from the 1940s, and the kind of cloth-wrapped cables that they used back then. They're basically like fuses. Once they light on fire, they will travel through your boat, quickly turning a beautiful boat into a Viking burial. But that is something for future Johannes to worry about. Now I was just focused on getting this stern back together. It is surprising to me how rotten a wooden boat can be and still float, but all it takes is one sprung plank to sink it. Taking on something like this, you really need to enjoy what you're doing. Many times I've been asked if it's not easier to just crush her and do something else, buy a different boat. But maybe for the first time in my life, I finally feel like I am where I'm supposed to be, right here, in this moment. The old Greek had a much broader sense of what love was, and not just the love of a partner, but something much wider, a kind of yearning toward beauty, creation, and becoming. Something to be channeled into everything you do. We're all here for such a limited time, and no one knows when their time is up. So I'd rather pursue things that fills my heart with joy, no matter how crazy they seem. A bit of finessing and the port side fashion piece went into place. Now it was just the backing piece left, and then I could start looking at the ring timber to finish up the main timbers of the stern. Though there was still a whole bunch of work left to be done in the lazarette before I could even think about closing her up again. And I was soon in for a rude awakening as to how far the rot and decay had gone. With the piece cut and shaped, I could finally get it into place. And with both fashion pieces and both their backing pieces in the boat, I could take a deep breath and relax, at least for the evening. This video has been made possible by Surfshark and by you as a viewer. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's become Patreons and to those of you that have donated through PayPal. It's thanks to your continuing support that these videos are made possible. Now, if you want early access to these videos, bonus content and a whole bunch of other goodies, then check out my Patreon. Link is in the description. Down there are also a couple of other ways that you can support this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. That sounds good.